Secretary to the Government of the Federation and Chair of the Presidential Task Force, Honorable Ministers of Health, Directors, colleagues, gentlemen of the press. Our social media platforms have been abuzz with issues related to the Nigeria International Travel Platform. So I decided to use this opportunity to address some of these issues. But I think the first thing we need to do is to cast our minds back to March 2020, early this year, when we were faced with a situation where people coming back from Nigeria through our airports were seeding infections into our country, and there was a clamor from Nigerians to shut the airports as quickly as possible. This was a very difficult decision for our country, for Mr. President, for the aviation industry. But we made this important decision. And it turns out that that decision, actually, to shut down our airports at that point, must have really prevented a large number of infections coming into Nigeria. And the number of seedings of people were limited to those that came through in those early months of the year when we were not sure of what was going on. So by carrying out decisive action under the instructions of Mr. President, we were indeed able to protect Nigeria from a much worse outbreak than it would otherwise have experienced. Fast forward to September this year. We're again faced with a situation where we had limited the number of infections, but the economy of our country was now suffering, and we really had to make that hard decision. And then lots of people also predicted that the reopening of our airports would lead to a spike of infections, that we would be back to where we were 6 months ago, and that we would experience an upsurge of infections. But because of the very diligent work of my colleagues, especially the aviation industry, we've had a very deliberate, very careful, very calibrated reopening of our airports. And anyone that would have gone through those airports, local or international, will attest to the fact that actually the aviation industry again has challenged conventional wisdom that we are unable to do anything properly in our country. And again, we may have dodged the second bullet, because again, we have not seen the upsurge of infections that people have predicted would happen. So why am I saying this? In all these decisions, platform, no platform, our primary objective is to prevent deaths from these infections, from COVID-19. So on a day where we mark, like the chair has said, 1 million deaths worldwide, I really urge all Nigerians to keep our eyes on the ball. Let's keep our eyes on the ball, on what we really want to achieve. Are we not able and willing to accept a little bit of inconvenience for the goals that A friend, Victor, called me yesterday. His wife, his mother was on the way back from the US. And he wanted my number to give to the mom, and was very afraid because his mother had watched a certain WhatsApp video that was circulating. And he wanted some assurance that his elderly mother will manage this system. I told Victor to trust the system, because I know from the data that we're collecting that for 95% of people using the portal is working. There's no single IT system rolled out in the world without some teething problems. And yes, for certain individuals, there may have been some issues which we're trying to resolve. But by and large, people have been using this portal fairly successfully without any hassle. So from the questions we're being asked, I put together 5 of the most important questions I think you'll be asking during your question and answer session, gentlemen of the press, so that we can get over them before you even come out. So the very first one is, why do we even need a PCR test? People are asking. Every Nigerian has a right to come into the country, and we shouldn't be preventing people coming in without a PCR test. I say yes. Every Nigerian has a right to come in, but you don't have a right to infect other Nigerians. So we've put a little bit of a preventive measure, similar as many other countries in the world, to enable us protect ourselves, because we know we don't have a stronger health system as you may have in the countries that you're living in. So please bear with us. It's a small price to pay for the future and the health of our country and its people. And we encourage you to keep trying. A pre-departure test is more or less a standard by most countries in the world now. The second one is if we do a pre-departure test, why is a post-arrival test necessary? There are two reasons. You have two separate opportunities for infection after your pre-departure test. One is in the 5 days prior to travel. And you know, initially we limited this to 72 hours, 3 days, we moved it to 96, and now we've moved it to 5 days. Because we recognize that many Nigerians were complaining, and sometimes they have to go on adjoining flights before getting to the airport of departure, and therefore it becomes a bit tricky. Many other countries have limited it. In fact, I just saw an announcement by the United Arab Emirates announcing that they too will require a pre-departure test, but 96 hours before departure. So by our allowing 5 days, we're fairly generous. But that means that there is an opportunity for infection both before travel and during travel. And we've actually seen that a fair number, I think about 5% of returning travelers in Abuja actually were infected at the point of arrival. So this justifies our work. And in a couple of studies just published, one in Vietnam and one in Hong Kong, both of which have demonstrated transmission during flights. The study out of Vietnam showed that in a flight of 217 passengers, 16 people were infected during that flight. So it is very important that we test on arrival, and we're trying to make this easier for people to do. Then the third question that has come up a lot is, why are people asked to pay for the privately for the test on arrival? You see, we have made a commitment as a government to make sure public sector testing is free for everyone throughout this outbreak. Most public health tests in Nigeria previously, whether it's been Lassa, yellow fever, monkeypox, whatever we've been testing for, where there's a threat to the public, the test has always been free. And so the government of Nigeria has worked very hard to ensure that our public sector testing is free. But the test in itself is not free. Remember, somebody's paying. Somebody's always paying. So the government of Nigeria has made a decision to prioritize the public and to make sure that we enable this test to be available for everyone that needs it in the public sector. We cannot compromise that for people traveling. Travel is a choice. So if you do want to travel, you have to pay for that test on arrival. And none of those funds, not a single dime, comes to NCDC or any federal government parastatal, ministry, agency, or the PTF. This goes directly to funding the test itself in each state, with a small percentage going to the state government negotiated for overheads. So none of this comes to NCDC. We're not making any money out of it. We never will do that. The fourth question is, why do we even need a travel portal? Why can we just not come back and, just like the yellow card system, you know, you come back and you find your way through it? You know, this is a unique situation. We have to manage our situation better. Our colleagues in the aviation industry have really worked hard in scheduling the flights, ensuring that there's enough time between each flight. But ultimately, not all the flights are coming in. As soon as we open up more, or they open up the airspace more, there'll be more people coming in. We cannot manage what we don't measure. So we need this information, we need the data to manage, to follow up. what people don't know, anyone that has come back from travel will tell you they receive a call every single day for the 7 days after arrival. We need your details in order to do that. If you're positive, we need to follow up with you and prevent further transmission in your family and in your communities. And finally, one question comes up, is testing all you do? You're always talking about testing. But it's not. Anyone that would have traveled would notice you have to wear a mask throughout the flight. Yes, it's inconvenient, but every airline insists that you do that. You have to stay indoors for 7 days after arrival to prevent transmission to others. You still have to adhere to all the social distancing guidelines and all of that. So all of this is to limit transmission. You know, the earlier we get used to these, the better, because even if there is a vaccine, it will still take us a while to scale up the production capacity for 6 billion people, to distribute it efficiently and effectively across the world. So yes, there will be teething problems. Everyone is working on this. And I'm sure that in a few weeks, just like everyone has forgotten the challenges with the call center and all the things that used to agitate us, we will get over this small bottleneck. You know, I'll end by saying, when you're practicing as a doctor, you're only primarily concerned about the health of the patient in front of you. And yes, what is the analogy here? If there's one WhatsApp video by one individual circulating, it's okay for people that are in that mode to think that this represents the experience of this individual. It must be very sad. And of course, we will do everything possible to make sure that everybody has a good experience. But when you work in public health, like I do, your goal is to ensure that most of the people have good health. And sometimes it means that not everybody will. So we'll continue working very hard to ensure that most people traveling will have a good experience. Sometimes we're unable to cater for every single thing. We've tried to solve problems on the technical side, and the NC will share a little bit on the hard work we've been doing on that. Public sector, private sector, everyone coming together. But I really want to assure Nigerians, especially those of us in the diaspora, especially my brothers in Sweden, to bear with us. You are important to us, very important. The contributions of the Nigerian diaspora are critical for our country. And as we celebrate Nigeria at 60, don't give up. We'll keep working very hard to prevent an escalation of cases in Nigeria, which is our primary commitment, but also work with every other person in the industry to make sure travel home is as convenient.